as the stock selection parameters are concerned, we will have a two-pronged approach out here. We would have to have a top-down approach, thereby trying to get the cycles within the automotive industry correct. And then we will also have a bottom-up strategy to pick up companies which have good growth potential, companies which have brand-building capabilities, and are also able to adapt to the changing landscape. Autos is a space where the landscape is evolving very, very fast.
Okay, so we'll discuss that a little more. But Santosh, many mutual fund houses, they're coming up with thematic funds. What has led to this increased attention or increased focus on the thematic field? And do you think investors are also responding in the same fashion? Are they also liking the surge in thematic funds?
So let's begin by saying that why is there so much interest? I think the investor is genuinely intent of parking his money in that theme or that sector. You know, we hear so much in the news about how certain segments of the Indian economy are doing well and people want a focused bite into that space. So when you give them a thematic fund, it's a great opportunity for them to participate. Now, second thing, from the AMC side, who are launching these funds, they are actually offering the investor an opportunity to capitalize a theme that is dominant, playing well in the economy, and you a fund where the investors can directly participate. Now, for example, we spoke about manufacturing, which is such a big buzzword in the last year or two, and maybe it will continue for some more time. Now, if someone wants to choose only manufacturing as a theme, today you do have the fund. So therefore, all the AMCs will be running. Not to forget, today, thanks to the SEBI rules around launch of funds and unique funds of that nature, almost every AMC has got the comfort of going and launching a thematic fund, getting an approval and investor requirements.
Okay, makes sense. So there is increased interest, and there is increased interest from investors as well, because they are getting one point focus in terms of their investment requirements as well. But Tanmay, tell me something. With so many schemes already available for investors to invest in, do you think NFOs make sense in that case? What is the idea behind NFOs fund houses? Because there are sometimes existing schemes already there in place.
Right. No, it's very true. Of course, every fund house would want to fill in the gaps that they have within the thematic options, or NFOs are one way to kind of capitalize on that. But when we think about us as SBI Mutual Fund, NFOs are very clearly thought through. If you see, even in the last 1 year, the only NFO that we came up was at the start of this year, that's the energy fund. And at that time, both energy and automotive were the two themes or sectors that were kind of discussed and debated. And at that point in time, we found a lot of interest and acceptance with the energy fund, and that's why we came up with energy at that point in time. Today, we are now coming up with the SBI Automotive Opportunities Funds as a consequence of the same.
Okay, so the energy funds saw massive response as well, around 6,300 crore rupees, more than that is what it garnered. That. So, Santosh, does it benefit fund houses to come with thematic funds in any way? Can they launch as many thematic funds they want in a particular year? Is there a limit to it? What do the rules suggest?
Essentially, the offering that you can come out with has to be unique in nature. So therefore, you see flexi-cap having done with, multi-cap having done with, and maybe a small cap, mid-cap and multi-cap, all those things when you've exhausted, you can look at unique thematic funds. And now you have to multiply that with the number of mutual fund companies that are present. So you have unique themes and you have the number of mutual funds. So therefore, you will always have a host of new fund offerings. Now, from an investor perspective, there is a expressed interest and a desire to participate in a particular theme. Now, you also have to remember, this is almost like the flavor of the season. Now, we spoke about manufacturing, we're speaking about auto, and at some level, the AMCs that do not even have the dominant banking and financial services also will launch this if they do not have it in their basket of services. The flows are actually determinant of the fact that how you launch these funds. If you look at the period between 2006, 7, 8, back in the day, almost every new fund house or fund was into infra space, power space, capital goods space, and huge flows. Right now, we're looking at that kind of a segment where huge flows are coming in. AMCs are happy, investors are happy to participate in that specific pie.
Oh, okay. So it again depends on, as you said, whatever the theme at that point, which is working, and of course promises greater returns as well. But you know, Tanmay, it is said that thematic funds are largely for risk takers, not maybe for first-time investors. How do you look at this? If somebody is looking at a thematic fund, a new investor, should they go ahead with it? What is your suggestion here?
No, you are right. A thematic fund does entail higher risks and hence also correspondingly higher return expectations also. Now, when we are also thinking about the automotive opportunities fund, what we believe is if one truly has to capture the various cycles within the space, an investor needs to have a longer term time horizon of a minimum 3 to 5 years, thereby not only kind of capitalizing on the opportunity within the space, but also when we think about it from a long term basis, it kind of gives that comfort to the investor remaining in it.
Okay, so if you are a new term investor or somebody who's been in the market cycle for a long time, the idea is long-term investing if you're looking at thematic funds. That's the crux of it.
No, absolutely. And take the case of auto, right? It's a long-term structural growth story that's premised on so many aspects, right? We can discuss that. And hence an investor will definitely be rewarded if they remain invested for the long period of time.
Okay, all right. Otherwise, there will be too much volatility in that short period of time. Santosh, do you think one should start their investing journey with thematic funds in that case? What has been the idea or the performance so far if we look at thematic funds?
As a thumb rule, when an investor is starting off, you would actually want to start off in a diversified fund. Could be a multi-cap or a flexi-cap. Now, the concept of thematic funds are little oriented towards the seasoned or the HNI investor who knows his risk appetite and he knows exactly what he wants. Now take the example of an IT segment. Now if you and I are bullish on the IT prospects, depending upon our predisposition, you're willing to wait through the cycle. 21 and 22 saw massive uptick in the entire IT sector, and then post that it cooled off. So therefore, if you're aware of how the theme plays out, you will take that call. Now for most investors, thematic is part 2 or what we call the softer side of their portfolio. But the bulk will still be multi-cap and flexi-cap as a strategy. You add thematic because you want a slice of that action and you want to enhance your portfolio for a high return because the risk is higher and therefore the returns also are higher. You add 1 or 2 maybe thematic funds to enhance the overall performance of the portfolio.
Okay. So when you say you can add that factor to enhance the return profile, how much should investors have in terms of thematic funds in their portfolio? Is there a percentage? Is there a number when it comes to an average portfolio? Of course, it would be different for different people, different risk profiles, but just in general.
So let me say that about 20% is generally the thumb rule. Some of these themes will already be present. Now, the exposure is less, therefore the need for thematic funds because they're 100% exposure to that theme or that sector. Now, when you choose those specific 1 or 2 or 3 thematic funds, you're giving yourself that extra edge for outperformance, and therefore, don't be overspread in thematic funds and it'll become too diluted, too diversified. So it's a combination with flexi and multi-cap funds, maybe 2 or 3 with an overall limit of about 20%, you'll be good.
Okay. And diversification is always the key, right? That asset allocation much in one particular scheme would not be so good for you. Gentlemen, it's a very interesting chat, but we have to get into a quick break. On the other side, we'll continue our discussion with both the gentlemen on thematic funds and what's happening in this space. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back. You're still tuned into MF Corner, and today on the show we are discussing the rise of thematic funds, the rising investor interest as well, and what does it really have in place when it comes to returns and, of course, the growth prospects as well. So, gentlemen, we discussed a lot in terms of who should it be for, how much should it be as a percentage in your portfolio. Let me come to you and specifically ask you, what is the reason for choosing an automotive fund? What are the growth prospects? Because sometimes it becomes a little cyclical. There was a time when we saw big growth, then it tapered off a bit, be it the CV cycle or be it the PV cycle. But what are you looking at right now in terms of the growth prospects here?
Right. So, as I was highlighting, auto is a very long-term structural growth story in which we truly believe in. And the argument is premised on three factors. One, the underpenetration in our country across vehicle categories, which is very, very starking when you compare it with various global economies. Second is the increasing premiumization as the affordability factor has improved. And we are seeing that premiumization in the consumer's mindset, where they want to own a more premium car or they want to own a more feature-rich vehicle in general. And third factor, which kind of again emphasizes on the long-term story for auto, is that it's a great proxy on the manufacturing theme also as such. And here you get to play not only the OEMs, which are the original equipment manufacturers, but also a plethora of auto ancillary companies which are manufacturing the components for the auto guys. And here you have a number of companies which are kind of throwing a lot of promise by not only doing maybe commodity products, but a lot of them are into structural components, a lot of them are into technology oriented components also, which makes us believe in the core theme of automotive from a medium to long term perspective.
Okay, so it'll have pure play OEMs, it'll have auto ancillaries. What about international exposure? Since you said we still have the penetration which is lower versus global companies or global markets, does it give exposure to international stocks as well? Yeah, absolutely. The fund has the objective to invest up to 35% of the fund into international stocks. And here we can surely evaluate a lot of the original equipment manufacturers. More importantly, I think one should evaluate the ones that are disruptors rather than the ones that are kind of getting disrupted. But at the same time, there are a lot of auto technology companies which are doing very, very good work at a global scale, which can feature as part of our universe of investing. So who would it not be suitable for in that case? We talk about suitability, but sometimes it's okay to know what would not be good for you as well. Right. I mean, the simplistic answer to that is somebody who is looking to kind of have short-term gains in their mind is what this fund is definitely not suitable for. As I was saying, and you also had a question with regards to what within autos are we witnessing at this point in time. Now, what we truly believe is the various cycles within the automotive industry across maybe two-wheelers, passenger cars, commercial vehicles, the broader categories that we talk of where we are present. If one truly has to capture the entire growth within the various cycles of the automotive industry, this is surely suitable for somebody looking for a minimum 3 to 5 year kind of a horizon, but surely for somebody looking for short it's not something that we would advise it. Okay, I'll come to you to understand what is auto and allied themes. We'll keep it towards the end. But Santosh, a lot of times people use business cycle funds and thematic funds interchangeably. Can they do that? What is the difference here?
Well, you're right. Most times, because of performance and because of the similarity in their nature, business cycles and thematic get confused. Now, let's just break down business cycles. In business cycles, you're actually playing on the macro part of the economy. Now, there are three maybe dominant parts of the macro economy. Number one, the economy is in an expansion mode. Number two, the economy is in a contraction mode. Number three, we're in a recovery mode. Now, when you look at these three distinct phases, pure economics over here, that the segment that you select will make a big difference in the outcome that you make in terms of returns and even the portfolio selection. A business cycle fund actually to capture that opportunity. For example, if right now the economy is going through the capex cycle and the expansion mode, some segments, a recovery mode, they will go overweight on that segment. Now, that could be across many, just doesn't have to be. For example, we so long discussed about auto. There could be manufacturing, there could be other segments which also form a part of business cycle. So therefore, a business cycle is a larger umbrella. Thematic is a more segmented segment within the economy, whereas a business cycle is more on the macros. And the thematic is about specific industry doing well. So though it seems confusing when you start looking at it, but actually as you delve deeper and understand more, you understand they are together for an investor to benefit from.
Thematic is a part of the entire business
Yes,
cycle theme that we talk about. Let me come to you, Tanmay. The question on, auto and allied business. What does it really mean here? And what are the other components that it covers or other idea around this particular theme?
Right. So very valid question. When we think about auto and auto-allied businesses, and the way we try to articulate our investment strategy is by bifurcating it into 4 broad buckets. One are the original manufacturers, a passenger car, a commercial vehicle, tractors, just to kind of have the horizon out here. And within that, our whole idea would be to not only balance the long-term growth outlook for each of these segments, but also try and capture the cyclical uptrend or downtrend within any individual OEM category. It's never the case that all do well in tandem. The second bucket for us are the auto ancillary companies, and here we, as I was mentioning, we have a plethora of companies, and they could be manufacturing commodity parts, they could be manufacturing structural components, or even technology-oriented components, and in many cases these companies are in fact technology leaders also. Here the universe, as I said, is very, very large, and they can be suppliers to not only just a single OEM, but to multiple OEMs, multiple vehicle categories, in fact even multiple components and technology. So the number of opportunities that you get to play within the automotive ancillary is quite huge. It gives us a very high growth diversified way of playing the automotive opportunity. The third bucket that we have looked at within the same space is on exports, and we are now witnessing a lot of companies investing for exports. And the competitiveness of India on a global landscape has improved quite dramatically. The cost of power, the cost of labor is quite comparable or even cheap in many cases. Most interestingly, the emission standards in India are at par with what they are in the globe, allowing a company to invest in a single capacity to cater to both the domestic opportunity as well as the exports opportunity. The final bucket is EVs. While I do mention EVs, one has to think about it as alternate fuel also. And here I think a lot of investing today for a very bright future going forward, thereby throwing opportunities maybe not from a domestic landscape, but also equally importantly on the exports landscape.
And we have a lot to come when it comes to EVs, right? It's still very small in India, so there's been a lot that's happening in the EV space, and emissions as well, new norms every time to stay updated with the global standards as well. Santosh, can you tell us some of the challenges and some of the positives of investing in thematic funds? This is very important because anyone who's investing might just invest, but it's very important to be aware as well of various aspects of this one.
So usually in thematic, one gets carried away by the present trend. Like I spoke earlier, it's usually the flavor of the market or the mood of the market right now that draws us into the thing. Once you're drawn in, if you are over concentrated over there, first of all, the theme itself is a concentrated bet. Now, if you are put a lot of money of a percentage of your portfolio over there, you tend to run the risk of your portfolio when the sector turns. Now that's very possible because we've seen it in the past that rotate. The sector rotation is a real dynamic aspect of the market. So therefore, it's important to sector concentration in thematics. Now the positives are well known that if it does well, you make a lot of money, it adds a whole lot of alpha to your portfolio. Now the second thing that you have to also keep in mind is that when a sector usually turns around, right, it takes a really long time for you to come back. A sector rotation, usually when it's done, right, it's not a very simple process. It's usually a violent experience in the portfolio. There's got a lot of drawdown and you'll have to wait for a really long period for it to bounce back. So do it cautiously. Thematic funds do help you to generate that extra alpha in your portfolio, and they are great ways to get specific exposure to specific funds that are doing well and at some level are the front running some part of the economy. So many themes are actually leading the economy into newer growth and higher growth. So therefore, it's important to have thematic funds, percentage of the portfolio, but be careful of the exposure and also be wary that sometimes when the sectors could be in it for the long haul.
Okay. So just to follow up on that, have there been any times when thematic funds have overtaken the big principal funds also? Has that happened?
Absolutely. In fact, whether you talk about the thematic fund as the sector or even some of the themes. For example, just recently, the last 6 months to 12 months, you've noticed how small cap and mid cap as a category is overtaken flexi cap and multi cap as a category. Likewise, whether it is capex or infrastructure or at some level even banking and financial services, there have been times where at some fund houses that the biggest fund is not a diversified fund but a thematic fund. That also tells you the investor appetite is returns and they will chase the flavor or the theme that's doing well, because at the end of the day most investors choose a fund based on what is relevant, what is doing well and what appeals to them. So today when you talk about manufacturing, PSU, auto, consumption, these are lovely ideas to be participating and that's overdone. So we have seen it in the past. Usually whenever you see huge flows, it's also a sign of small caution to say, am I overdoing it?
There's a lot of caution in the market already, but it makes sense to get sane advice to understand these funds, because as we have been pointing out, it's not for somebody who's just starting. So that's why good advice from somebody is always important, and as you all pointed out, it's important to have it in your portfolio. Just the exposure is something that you have to manage, but that goes for every kind of scheme, right? To have a diverse with proper asset allocation. Gentlemen, it was such a pleasure to have both of you in the studio and to be speaking to both of you to understand this particular category. But with that, we'll take your leave on this edition of MF Corner today, but stay tuned for Closing Bell to take you through the last hour of trade.
Most of the Asian markets are trading with losses, but the Japanese indices appear to be bucking the trend.
Markets ended the day mixed as the Nasdaq closed at a fresh record high.
Big move in metals like copper, which has broken out to a new high.
Very, very healthy set of numbers from BL to end FY24 Q4.
There is widespread discomfort among large banks on that 5% general provision which is at the construction phase of the project.
25 lower on the Nifty and about 85 lower on the Sensex.
Need now to bigger role play as a strategy. Other vertical also I can be contribute on that.
We are looking at an all-time highs yet again of $1,440.